Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this is the 2024 KTM 890 SMT, and this bike makes no sense. And part of the reason it makes no sense is because of how KTM wants to market it. But here's the thing, this is a bike that I would absolutely buy because I think it appeals to a market that maybe isn't being spoken to. So in this video, I'm gonna do a complete review of this bike, and we're gonna talk about the pieces that matter, the pieces that maybe don't matter, and we're gonna try to make sense of it to see if this is the sport touring bike for you. So I'm filming here at McLean Sports here in Fredericton, New Brunswick. They give me complete access to their entire vehicle lineup, and they've got so many brands here. But if there's anything in the KTM lineup that you're interested in, Suzuki, Yamaha, a whole bunch more, make sure you do me a favor, hit subscribe to the channel. And if you have questions that I don't get to in this video on this bike or other bikes, make sure you let me know in the comments below, because I will come back to the different bikes again and again and again, including this bike. I won't cover everything possible. And if you have a question and you just want to know the answer, I'm your guy. Let me know in the comments what you want to know, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And now we're going to get into this review. All right, so when I talk about a bike that just does not make sense, I'm gonna try to make sense of this for you. This bike is a sport touring bike on KTM's website. Now, if you think about a sport touring bike, you want something that's kind of sporty, but if you look through the tire section when you're shopping sport touring tires, the number one comment they're gonna talk about is the life of the tire. And then it's also got Moto functions in here, traction control, ABS, and a whole bunch of other features in here. Moto bikes, they don't care about tires at all. If you YouTube Motos right now, you're gonna see burnouts, you're gonna see tires sliding around, you're gonna see no regard for tire wear. So why do these two bikes mesh? Well, part of it is because KTM used to have a 990 in this area, and KTM's trying to kind of look within its lineup. But where you can look is within the greater motorcycle picture. We know that powerful sport tourers are kind of changing from traditional sport bike to more taller adventure style bikes. And if you look within KTM's lineup, this is basically the mix between the Duke and the adventure bike in the 890 class. But it's more to that as well. So it's a very confusing bike looking within the KTM lineup. But as you start looking outside and you think of something like maybe a Versys 650, the Versys lineup is also a mixed up lineup. It's a Kawasaki bike, but you got the 300, which is more off-road. You got the 650, which is kind of a little bit of touring, a little bit sporty. And then you move to the 1000, which is far more touring than sporty. This one to me seems like the step up from that Versys 650 in every great imaginable way. First of all, it costs a little bit less than the Versys 1000, and you have still a parallel twin engine, but then you're getting a ton of technology, and you're really keeping that sport, and in fact enhancing that sport aspect of that taller kind of touring bike. You have good wind protection here, you can get a taller windshield if you want, but you don't really need the Supermoto stuff for any of that. So why do they focus so much on the Supermoto stuff? And the reality is they built true sport and fun behavior into this sport tourer, and that's what we're gonna make sense of it, and that's what we're gonna look at today. So let's take a look at the front wheel. I always say when you start at the front wheel of a motorcycle, you can really talk about its intent. You can see what the manufacturer intended with it. And when you look at this, you've got the Michelin tires here. These are the same tires. These are the Power GP tires. Same thing as you would get on the Duke 890. So you're starting with the adventure style kind of chassis and bringing in these tires. Now, for some people, it kind of begins and ends right there. But the reality is what you're getting here is a little bit less suspension travel that's fully adjustable. Now, less suspension travel we always think of as a bad thing, but at the end of the day, you still got all kinds of travel for on-road use, and you've got a little less wallowiness compared to an adventure bike. So if you are the kind of person that likes the style of an adventure bike, but you know that 99.9% of the time you're going to be on pavement, you don't want to go to an off-road tire that gives you maybe a cool look, but maybe isn't super practical for your riding. So what this does is makes all of that on-road riding a whole lot more fun. So upside down suspension here, so that's really going to focus on the less unsprung weight, and they do talk about that a lot, that they're trying to get that less unsprung weight in this area. You've got the alloy wheels here instead of the cast wheels here instead of the spoked wheels. You've got obviously huge double disc brakes with the radial mount caliper there. You've got the lower fender down here, the upper fender up here. Again, basically giving you the styling of the adventure bike while still giving you the practicality that you need on an on-road bike. And you're gonna have a lot of grip, a lot of fun here. We can talk about the brakes in a second when we move to the electronics, because there's a lot to talk about there as well. One thing here is you can kind of see that KTM didn't quite go all the way. Some of their adventure bikes, they have the Brembo brake package here. This still has that radial mount, but just KTM branded instead of Brembo branded. So you've got strong stuff, but there is a little bit of a you know, an acknowledgement that maybe this is also hitting a price point, and I think it's a pretty fair price point when you start digging into what you get with this bike. So taking a look at the heart of the bike here, you've got a lot of things going on. First of all, the engine in there. You have an engine that puts out 4-cylinder-like power. Basically, I say that because it basically matches my brand new 2022 4-cylinder Kawasaki bike. And this one has what they list as 100 Newton meters of torque and 77 kilowatts. So we'll throw that up on screen what that is in horsepower and foot-pounds. And you have a pretty powerful 2-cylinder in a parallel twin, not a V-twin. So it's compact parallel twin, a little bit different sort of crank there. So it gives you that sort of V-twin kind of sound and feel. But you have an extremely powerful engine here. However, it is down-tuned from the Duke and more on the adventure bike style. I think that kind of works with this style of bike. I don't think anybody's going to really care. You're still dealing with crazy good power, but again, it fits that touring bike more so than just that Duke kind of play, you know, kind of bike. Now, this is still very playful. We're going to talk about that, but there's still some off-roady type things going on here. So let me show you them as we zoom in a little closer. All right, so we're going to start with the high mount exhaust, very off-roady type thing. You can still fit luggage over top of that. You can get that from KTM, so it kind of curves around there. Maybe takes a little bit of luggage space on the right side bar there, or right side bag there. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You do have rubber mounted pads for the passenger right there. You have the suspension down there. Of course, that is very sport bike-like in its angle and positioning, sort of close to the front and sort of where you want it to be. And then that is preload adjustable on the other side. There's a little knob on the other side that's preload adjustable. And then we kind of get into this busy shot of everything going on, but one little thing that's interesting here is check out those foot pegs. In fact, let's just zoom into those all the way in and check them out for a second, because you have that real adventure style foot peg here. You've got that soft kind of, well, not super soft, but you know, rubber mounted pad in there. You can see you could take that out if you had a slippery area, and you still have the wide pegs that have the aggressive tread there, so you would have the adventure style pegs there. What I like about these is they're actually fairly wide, easy to find pegs. And again, on a touring bike, that works just fine. You've also got the big grippy brake pedal there, not a little thin you know, piece. You've got something with a little bit of traction there. And again, as you're moving your feet on and off this bike, if you want to drive like Supermoto bike, those are both going to be easy to find because they're a little bit larger. And they, you know, they're just easy to get to with your feet, both the brake and the foot peg. Now, when we talk about brakes, we have to talk about the rear brakes. There is a Supermoto mode. We're going to get into that when we head to the dash. So let's just keep moving through and we'll work our way to that dash and talk about some of the drive modes. So as we work our way around and we head to the dash, let's just show you what it looks like with me, about an average 6-footer on this bike. Now, the reason I set Versus 650 off the top is in part because I used to own a Versus 650, and the Versus 650 feels very similar to this. You have a commanding riding position. I would say this seat is a little wider. If this seat was a little narrower, I could flat-foot it a little bit easier. It's not so much the seat height, it's the seat width. Now, that doesn't matter, that seat width at all, when you come up here. It is a narrow sort of area for your knees that is wind protected down here. And this little fairing up top is, again, gonna take all of the wind off of at least my chest, but allow that wind to my face. One of the complaints I had when I drove a Versus 650 style bike, including that Versus 650, and a lot of these style bikes, when you get a huge windshield on here on a really warm day, you just get hot. Doesn't matter what you're wearing. I always wear a protective jacket of some kind, and you just get hot. So I kind of like that this windscreen is lower down, and of course you can get the bigger windshield of the adventure bike, slap it on here as an accessory, but I kind of like that it's lower down because your helmet can take clean air and you still don't have the fatigue coming from, you know, a naked bike or something like that. You've got good protection there, and again, you have large protectors over your hands. All of that is deflecting wind away from your body, away from your chest, so you're not using as much energy to simply hold your body up. And speaking of holding your body up, you are very upright. You've got a lot of room to move around on this seat. You can move back, you can move forward. I can't do that right now because I got the side stand. I don't want to drop it here on the slick floor here. But you've got a lot of room to move, and it's very comfortable. It's very much a touring bike kind of feel. Throw in the cruise control and some of the other controls that we're going to show you, and you can see that this is a true sport touring bike, even though they talk about that Supermoto stuff that I think takes away from a lot of people maybe wanting to consider this bike. Take a look at the back end here. You've got a nice little rack here. Again, it comes like this from the factory. You've got a little bit of tie down. You can get, you know, it's level to the rear seat, which is a typical touring bike thing. So if you're just riding alone, you've got quite a bit of space here to mount a duffel bag, other kinds of things. But again, you can get hard luggage, you can get all kinds of luggage, you can get a top box, you can get all kinds of things. So you've got the basis here to get going. You've got nice little easy grab handles. I like to use these when I'm maneuvering the bike around, but also again, a place to tie things down. So again, good options there. And that one-piece seat is nice and big, and it wraps around here. So even when your legs are around the side here, again, this is great for Supermoto type stuff where you can kind of grip that the bike through the grippy padded seat, but it also is nice on a touring bike because you've got good control, good feeling, and again, that makes this a very sporty sport tourer. Moving on to the fuel tank and then the gauges. Most of the time, there's not a lot to talk about in a fuel tank here. This is a little smaller than the adventure bike. That's going to give it a little less weight up top. You still have pretty good range out of this bike, though. I think, I won't say, I think it's 300 plus kilometers. I can't remember exactly what it is, but we can look that up too. That's all in the specs on the KTM website as well. But you do have a fuel tank that drops fuel lower in the bike. It doesn't all sit up high here. So again, keeping that center of gravity. Sometimes these adventure touring style bikes, because they're taller and you put a lot of fuel up top, they can feel a little more top heavy, especially when they're full of fuel. This one's not so bad. Now let's take a look at some controls and then the really nice dash. All right, taking a look at a really busy shot here. Again, this is your clutch lever out here, and you can see that unlike the more traditional manufacturers that use an adjustment for your clutch lever, you've got an adjustment right here. So as I zoom out a little bit, you're gonna see that clutch lever, that is what gives you that distance, so you can set that clutch lever to further out or closer together. Now, a lot of times we talk about how that affects different hand sizes, but really what it does for you as well is it allows you to have that grab point exactly where you want it by adjusting it where you want it. So again, you can move this closer or further out with that little adjustment there. That's a nice thing to have. Now let's just move the camera back a little bit. We'll get a little bit more focused on the controls here. Let's see if we can do that. All right. First of all, these are the menu controls. I'm going to go through the menu in this really gorgeous screen here in a second, and that's what I'm going to be using. Pretty much everything I do is right through this screen. Now it's worth noting there's cruise control up here as well. There's the trigger over here to flash the pass and throw that on, and that's your high beam right there. Got a horn button down there and the signal lights here. Again, good feeling switch gear on all these KTM bikes, really nice to have. On the other side, there's a hazard lights and a start kill switch, and won't even bother showing you that, doesn't matter too much. Let's show you the dash right now. All right, so I'm fully zoomed into this, and you can see there's some fingerprints. Somebody's tried to use this as a touchscreen. It is not a touchscreen. There's also a little USB port off the side here, so you can power your devices off the side there. And then let's turn the key on. And I want to show you how those fingerprints and the glare basically disappear. This is a very legible dash, even in the, in this configuration here with the digital dash. Now, we're going to try to cycle through here some of these things. First of all, you've got a number of things that you can look at here. So let's just kind of go back out and we'll go into some of the settings here. There's your motorcycle settings, there's ride modes and that kind of thing. So let's just click on the motorcycle for a second. Ride mode, we've got ABS mode. Let's just click into ABS mode for a second here, and you can see there's a road mode there. There's a supermoto mode, and that allows that rear slip to happen. And so road and supermoto. So that's, again, just part of what you've got here. So let's go back. We'll go to the ride mode, do the same thing. There's a sport mode, a street mode, a track mode, and a rain mode. So a lot of sport type modes in here. Street and sport is going to be plenty sporty with this engine. But then, of course, there's that track mode as well. And you can customize some of those things there. Let's go down to the traction control, slip regulation thing. This is also worth talking about here as well. Hopefully you can read these, there's a little bit of flicker on your screen that doesn't flicker in real life. That's just the screen interacting with it there. So you've got the traction control, you've got on or off right there. So again, that allows you to have that slip, and it kind of shows you in the diagram exactly what it'll allow you to do. Let's go back for a second. We're going to leave that on. Go to the quick shifter. You do have a quick shifter. Again, this is going to add a ton of fun zipping through the mountain roads. Again, just real quick, keep it in the revs, keep it exactly where you want. So there's so many things to show you in here. Let's go back down to, there's the bike info. Why don't we just select that for a second? All kinds of things. Actually, we'll go back in here. There is trip meter, and there are all kinds of things here. So your settings in here, let's just go to some of the settings. There's a quick shifter, there's daytime running lights, you can set it on or off. Shift light, you can set it up, clock date, units, language, all kinds of things. And then heating is kind of an interesting. Let's select heating here. This bike, as it's equipped, does not have heated grips. You can see there said not installed. It does not have a rider seat heat. It does not have a pillion seat heat, but you can get that stuff all here in the software here. So tons of features here that make it able to buy the bike as is and add things as you go. And again, the graphics don't show perfectly on the screen, but they really do show well over here. Nice, clear, easy to read tack that is sort of a traditional style tack as far as there's a lot of movement on the screen. So at a glance, without reading the numbers, you can see where your revs are at. Again, if I'm standing back looking at my screen, I haven't got my glasses on, I know that that's 5,000, I know that that's 8,000, but I can see if I'm in that range at a glance what it is. And that's, again, having that analog tack was really good. Tells you your drive mode, tells you your gear indicator, tells you your ABS mode, tells you your traction control mode. And then we should talk about how all those things come together. So let's do that real quick. So one of the key pieces to this is not just that it has traction control and ABS, it has the ability to have cornering traction control or cornering ABS. So it can sense lean angles, it can sense braking motions, it can sense, wheelie motions, it can sense all of those things in the various levels of traction control, the various levels of ABS and that kind of thing. And that means, again, setting it up for Supermoto. You can turn those rear ABS off, it changes the settings of the front ABS as well. You can change all those settings in the dash, but the reality is, if you're like me, and this is where I'm going to hit home with it, I don't think most people buying this bike, or at least the market that should buy this bike, is probably ever going to use, or very rarely will use, those Supermoto functions. But the point is to have all those functions here, to have that integrated sort of IMU, that inertial management unit is what Kawasaki calls it. You have to forgive me, I used to work a lot with the Kawasaki bikes. Having that lean sensitive, angle sensitive computer that can sense the corner that you're in, so it changes the ABS behavior. It can sense the corners you're in for traction control and other kind of thing. Having all of those things makes this a sporty ride. But it's not just the electronics. There's a steering damper in here as well, and that you see those on high-end sport bikes, racetrack style sport bikes. So why do you have it on here? Well, if you're doing a wheelie and you land that wheelie, sometimes having that steering damper down in here is going to allow you to keep from getting that wobble kind of started. So you've got all the sporting components in here, really easy to adjust by hand on the fly. Suspension right at the top here, we'll show you those in just one second here. But all of those things add up to a very sporting ride while still being comfortable. So let's show you the top of the suspension. We're going to show you the front of the bike, and then we're going to wrap up with who should buy this bike, not just who KTM aims at in their marketing, but who should really consider this bike. So we're standing kind of at the front of the bike, looking at the front of the handlebars, and that allows you to see the suspension adjustments. Now, what I love about this is when you're riding, you can actually adjust this. You can see here it's got a clickiness to it, so they click into spot right there. This is the compression, that is the rebound, and it is white and red. Now, you're not going to be able to read that on the go, but you know that rebound red, RR, rebound red, then you can just adjust that, and compression, of course, is the other one on the white. But because a lot of bikes require you to have tools, a screwdriver, something to adjust that on the fly, this one does not. So literally while you're going down the road, you can adjust your front suspension, which allows you to really customize that, brings that into that higher end suspension, higher end, sporting was a key focus of this sport tour. So taking a look at the front of this KTM bike, you've got that traditional KTM kind of insect look. Now, apparently this is a controversial look. You guys have let me know that some people like the KTM look, some people don't. I actually think it looks pretty cool. Maybe it's just in person, it doesn't have that classic look, like the round headlight kind of thing, but it does look pretty cool, and you've got those cool LED sort of marker lights there. Now, what's interesting about this is not so much the look, it's the controversy of a sport tour having a short little windscreen like this. Now, as I mentioned before, you can get a taller windscreen there, but I said that really works for me because that is still giving you a lot of protection. If you look at that and the handguards, a lot of the wind is going to stay off your chest area, and so then your head is free in the clean air, but your body still has protection on a long tour. Now, if you want that full windshield, you can get it, but for me, this kind of appeals as is. A couple things worth noting as well. LED signal lights there as well. I think most people would expect that. But yeah, kind of a cool look, and I like the way they went with the option without the big windshield. It fits that Supermoto style, but it also, I think, fits pretty well with the sport touring crowd who wants a little bit more sport. All right, so let's talk about who this bike is for. Now, again, if you're a rider like me, it's probably different. There's going to be some controversy about what I say right now because KTM has absolutely designed this for the Supermoto rider that wants to move up, have that crazy, wild Supermoto style ride, but also want something to get to those roads because regular Supermoto bikes are not that comfortable on a longer trip. To me, this is the sport touring bike that most of us are looking for. If you think about the traditional sport tour, there's really only two left: the Ninja 1000, the Suzuki GT or GSX 1000 GT. Those are the sort of Ninja style or GSX-R style bikes that have a little bit more upright seating position. Those do put you a little lower, and they're probably a little bit better handling. Again, it just depends on how you look at it. But the question you have to ask yourself is, do you want the absolute peak in handling, or do you want something that is fun and capable? Because if you're searching for fun, there's a lot of ways to get fun, and that's where this bike really steps in. To me, the adventure style offers that comfort, and it offers that freedom to go anywhere in an adventure bike. But if you're anything like me, the going anywhere on a heavier bike like this is probably going to be no more than a gravel road, a dirt road. And again, if you hit a lot of those, get the adventure bike, you'll be happy. But if you kind of like a lot of that adventure bike, but you know deep down in your heart you're going to be on the roads, you might as well have fun on those roads, and that's where this stands out. The reason I did the Versa 650 comparison is because I used to own that bike, and to me it was just kind of that perfect sporty enough bike, but if I wanted to amp it up a little bit, what would I do? Well, I went one direction. This is the direction you could go if you really want to stay in that line. This gives you all the electronic suite that you would want, the quick shifter, the cruise control, the really great dash, customizing your traction control, your ABS modes, all of those kinds of things. It also gives you the hardware you need to have a much sportier ride. It gives you the engine to have a much more powerful ride, but it still gives you great comfort, and in fact probably more comfort than even that bike has, while building in from hardware and software point a fun vehicle to ride. So who should buy this bike? If you're like me, I don't think you need the Supermoto software to enjoy this bike. You may never dabble into letting that rear wheel do burnouts, letting that rear wheel slide in a turn. Maybe that's not your thing at all. Maybe you want those tires to last a lot longer than a typical Supermoto rider. I think this bike still fits for you, but it's going to give you more fun than a typical sport touring type bike. So for me, this is my bike of 2023. Now, this is a 2024 model, and I was wrapping up this year. I was gonna do best of bikes, and I kind of didn't get around to it, but I can tell you right now, this is the most interesting bike I've looked at today, or looked at this year. It's going to give you that sporting feel, it's going to give you that touring feel, and it really doesn't have a great competitor out there that does what this does. It's way more sport, way more fun than a lot of those bikes. It's also really good comfort, pretty good wind protection. It is a really interesting bike with great technology. So let me know if there's something that you want to know about this bike that I missed. I'd be happy to give you more answers, more information on it. And any chance I get to come back to this bike is a pleasure for me. But of course, if there's anything else in the KTM lineup, anything else, Suzuki, Yamaha, Kawasaki, we got all kinds of brands. We got Spiders coming up from Can-Am, Spiders, lots of that kind of stuff coming up in the spring as we get out to these, including many road tests as well. So midwinter here just after Christmas, and this is my first look at the 2024. There will be more 2024 bikes coming up. If you're into supermotos, we got a Suzuki supermoto bike that we'll do in the next couple days. We've got the full KTM, the 1290 Adventure, so full adventure bike from KTM coming up in the next couple days as well. Lots to talk about in this lineup. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll talk to you in the next one.